When powerful bullies cornered a brilliant female CEO in Boston's most exclusive hotel, they had no idea the quiet janitor watching nearby was a decorated Navy SEAL who would single-handedly take down 50 men to protect her. But this wasn't just about justice, it was about a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone could imagine. The marble floors of Boston's Imperial Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers as evening shadows stretched across the opulent lobby. Outside, autumn rain drummed against floor-to-ceiling windows, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights beyond. It was the kind of night when secrets were meant to stay hidden, when powerful men made deals in dark corners, and when the vulnerable found themselves with nowhere to run. Kate Morrell stood alone near the mahogany reception desk, her emerald dress a stark contrast against the hotel's gold and cream interior. At 32, she had built Morrell Dynamics from nothing into a billion-dollar tech empire. But tonight, her company's future hung by a thread. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched a leather portfolio containing documents that could either save her life's work or destroy it completely. "Ms. Morrell," the voice cut through the lobby's ambient murmur like a blade through silk. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." Kyle Brennan emerged from the shadows near the hotel bar, his silver hair perfectly styled, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection. At 55, he commanded respect through fear rather than admiration, his pale blue eyes holding the coldness of a man who had crushed dreams for profit. Behind him, 3 men in dark suits flanked his movements, corporate enforcers dressed as businessmen. "I'm here, aren't I?" Kate's voice carried more strength than she felt. "Though I have to say, Kyle choosing the Imperial for this meeting seems a bit dramatic even for you." A thin smile played at the corners of Kyle's mouth. "I thought you might appreciate the symbolism. After all, empires have a way of falling." The lobby's other guests, a mixture of tourists, business travelers, and Boston's elite, continued their conversations, oblivious to the corporate warfare unfolding mere feet away. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, their melody providing an incongruously peaceful soundtrack to what was about to become a battle for Kate's professional survival. "Let's skip the theater," Kate said, her hazel eyes flashing with defiance. "You wanted this meeting. Here I am. What exactly do you want, Kyle?" "What I want," Kyle said, stepping closer until she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the faint scent of whiskey, "is for you to be reasonable. Your company is bleeding money. Your investors are getting nervous. Your board is questioning your leadership. I'm offering you a way out with some dignity intact. By selling to Brennan Industries for 30 cents on the dollar." Kate's laugh held no humor. "That's not dignity, Kyle. That's robbery." Kyle's expression hardened. "That's business, Catherine. Something your father understood before his unfortunate passing." The mention of her father hit like a physical blow. Kate's hand tightened on her portfolio knuckles, white against the brown leather. "Leave my father out of this." "Your father was a visionary," Kyle continued, his voice taking on a mock sympathetic tone. "But visions don't always translate to sustainable business models. Morrell Dynamics has been living on borrowed time and borrowed money for months. I'm simply offering to ease that burden. By stealing my company. By acquiring a failing business and turning it into something profitable." Kyle gestured to one of his men who immediately stepped forward with a briefcase. "The contracts are all prepared. Sign tonight and by morning you'll be free of all that stress. You can even stay on as a consultant. We'll find something suitable for your skill set." The condescension in his voice made Kate's skin crawl. She'd heard that tone before from investors who thought a woman couldn't run a tech company, from board members who questioned every decision, from competitors who assumed she was riding on her father's legacy rather than building her own. "And if I refuse?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Kyle's smile turned predatory. "Then tomorrow morning, certain information about Morrell Dynamics' financial irregularities might find its way to the SEC. Information about questionable accounting practices, inflated revenue reports, and offshore accounts that don't quite add up. Those reports are fabricated and you know it. Proving that could take years in court, years your company doesn't have. Years that would bankrupt not just you, but every employee who depends on moral dynamics for their livelihood. Kyle paused, letting the weight of his threat settle. Think about them, Catherine. Think about the families who'll lose their homes while you fight a battle you can't win. Kate felt the walls closing in around her. She'd spent the last 6 months fighting off Kyle's increasingly aggressive takeover attempts, but he'd been more thorough than she'd anticipated. Every move she'd made, he'd countered. Every ally she'd tried to cultivate, he'd turned against her. The man was ruthless, methodical, and worst of all, he was winning. I need time to review the documents, she said finally. Time is a luxury you don't have. Kyle nodded to his men, who immediately moved to flank Kate's position. My lawyers are waiting upstairs. We can finalize everything tonight. You mean your lawyers can witness you strong-arming me into signing away my life's work? I mean, my lawyers can ensure this transition happens smoothly with minimal disruption to your employees' lives. Kate looked around the lobby, hoping to catch the eye of anyone who might help if this situation escalated further. But the other guests seemed wrapped in their own worlds, their conversations creating a bubble of normalcy that felt increasingly fragile. Near the elevator bank, she noticed a maintenance worker mopping the floors with methodical precision. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and the kind of quiet presence that made him almost invisible to the wealthy clientele surrounding him. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sat on a nearby bench, reading a picture book, occasionally looking up to smile at her father. Something about the man's posture caught Kate's attention. Despite his casual work clothes and humble task, he carried himself with a subtle alertness that spoke of training, military training, if she had to guess. His movements were economical, precise, and his dark eyes occasionally swept the lobby with the kind of awareness that came from years of watching for threats. Admiring the help, Kyle's voice dripped with disdain as he followed her gaze. Don't worry. After tonight, you won't have to concern yourself with such mundane details. You bastard, Kate whispered, her composure finally cracking. Careful, Catherine. We're in public. Kyle stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You have exactly 10 minutes to make your decision. Sign the papers, or watch everything your father built crumble while you're fighting federal charges. The jazz quartet finished their song, and for a moment the lobby fell into relative silence. Kate could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of Kyle's ultimatum pressing down on her like a physical force. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed for, came down to this moment. Time's up, Kyle said, checking his expensive watch. What's it gonna be? Before Kate could answer, the maintenance worker's daughter looked up from her book and tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, can we go get ice cream now? You said we could after you finished work. The man Marcus, according to his name tag, knelt down to his daughter's level, his stern features softening completely. Just a few more minutes, sweetheart. Let Daddy finish this section, and then we'll find the best ice cream in all of Boston. Deal. Deal. The little girl giggled, her laughter echoing through the tense atmosphere like a beacon of innocence. Kyle's patience finally snapped. Enough stalling, Catherine. Sign the papers or what? Kate found her voice again drawing strength from the simple reminder that there were still good people in the world. People who worked honest jobs and made promises to their children that they actually kept. You'll destroy my company, ruin my reputation. You're going to do that anyway. At least this way, I go down fighting. Kyle's mask of civilized businessman finally slipped, revealing the predator beneath. You stubborn little problem here. The voice was quiet, calm, but it carried an authority that made everyone in the immediate vicinity stop what they were doing. Marcus had straightened to his full height. Kate realized he was even taller than she'd thought, easily 6'3", and was looking directly at Kyle with eyes that had gone from warm chocolate to cold steel. Excuse me. Kyle turned, his tone dripping with the kind of entitled arrogance that came from years of never being challenged by anyone he considered beneath his social station. I asked if there was a problem, Marcus repeated, setting his mop aside and moving closer with the fluid grace of a predator. The lady seems distressed. Kyle's enforcers immediately tensed their hands, moving toward the inside of their jackets in a gesture that wasn't lost on Marcus. His own posture shifted almost imperceptibly, and Kate realized she was watching a man who had been in life-or-death situations before. "This is a private conversation," Kyle said coldly. "I suggest you return to your cleaning." "I suggest you lower your voice," Marcus replied evenly. "You're disturbing other guests." The confrontation was drawing attention now. Conversations throughout the lobby were trailing off as people began to notice the tension building near the reception desk. The hotel's night manager, a thin man in his 40s, started moving toward them from behind the front desk. Kyle's face flushed red with indignation. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I could buy this entire hotel with my pocket change." "Could you?" Marcus's tone remained maddeningly calm. "That's impressive. Must make you feel very important." The quiet sarcasm in Marcus's voice was like gasoline on Kyle's rage. "Security!" he barked. "Remove this man from the premises immediately." "Daddy!" Lily's small voice cut through the growing tension. She had looked up from her book and was watching the confrontation with wide, worried eyes. "What's happening?" Marcus's expression immediately softened as he looked at his daughter. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just some grown-ups having a disagreement. Keep reading your book." But Kyle had noticed the child, and something cruel and calculating entered his expression. "Remove both of them," he told his men. "The little girl is probably a security risk anyway. Who knows what kind of background checks this place runs on their maintenance staff." Kate watched Marcus's entire demeanor change in that instant. The calm, controlled maintenance worker disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous. His dark eyes fixed on Kyle with an intensity that made the temperature in the lobby seem to drop 10 degrees. "Sir." The night manager finally reached them, his voice nervous and apologetic. "Is there some kind of problem? Perhaps we could resolve this quietly." "The problem," Kyle said, his voice rising again, "is that your employee is interfering with important business. I want him fired. Immediately." Marcus took a step closer to Kyle, and Kate saw something in his movements that reminded her of documentaries she'd seen about apex predators utterly controlled but ready to strike with devastating efficiency. "You want to threaten a business deal," Marcus said quietly. "That's between adults. You want to threaten a child's father's livelihood in front of that child." His voice carried a note of warning that made Kyle's enforcers shift uncomfortably. "That's where we have a problem." "Are you threatening me?" Kyle sputtered, his face now purple with rage. "I'm explaining a boundary," Marcus replied. "Seems like the kind of thing a successful businessman would understand." Kate found herself torn between admiration for Marcus's quiet courage and terror at how quickly the situation was escalating. She could see more hotel security moving toward them now, and Kyle's men were getting increasingly aggressive in their posturing. "I think," she said, stepping between Marcus and Kyle, "we should all take a step back and—" "Stay out of this, Catherine," Kyle snapped. "You've already made your choice. Now you get to watch the consequences." He gestured sharply to his men, and Kate realized with growing horror that this was about to become much more than a simple business disagreement. Kyle wasn't just planning to destroy her company. He was going to make an example of anyone who dared to stand in his way. "Daddy," Lily said again, her voice smaller now. "I'm scared." That simple statement from an innocent child seemed to crystallize something in the air around them. Kate saw Marcus's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, saw his weight shift in a way that suggested he was preparing for action. The jazz quartet had stopped playing entirely now, and the lobby had fallen into an expectant silence, broken only by the rain against the windows and the soft hum of expensive air conditioning. Everyone seemed to sense that they were witnessing the calm before a very dangerous storm. Kyle's lead enforcer, a mountain of a man with scarred knuckles and cold eyes, took a step toward Marcus. "You heard Mr. Brennan. Time to leave." Because Marcus didn't move. "I heard him. I also heard a little girl say she was scared. Until she's not scared anymore, I'm not going anywhere." "That's not your decision to make," the enforcer growled, reaching out to grab Marcus's arm. What happened next would be replayed on social media thousands of times over the following days. But even witnessing it firsthand, Kate could barely follow the sequence of movements. Marcus's hand moved with surgical precision, intercepting the enforcer's grab and redirecting it in a way that sent the much larger man stumbling backward into a marble pillar. "Daddy!" Lily's voice was barely a whisper now. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said without taking his eyes off Kyle's remaining men. "Everything's going to be fine." But Kate could see that everything was definitely not going to be fine. Kyle was pulling out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen as he sent what were probably urgent messages. More men in suits were entering the lobby from the street entrance, and the hotel's security team was looking increasingly overwhelmed. "You have no idea what you've just started," Kyle said to Marcus, his voice shaking with rage and something that might have been anticipation. "No idea at all." Marcus finally looked directly at Kate, and she saw something in his dark eyes that made her breath catch. Not fear, but a kind of weary recognition. This wasn't the first time he'd found himself protecting someone from overwhelming odds. And from the look in his eyes, it probably wouldn't be the last. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I think you might want to call someone. This is about to get complicated." As if summoned by his words, the lobby's main entrance burst open, and a stream of men in identical dark suits began flooding into the Imperial Hotel's marble sanctuary. Kate counted at least a dozen, then stopped counting as more kept coming. Kyle's smile was triumphant and vicious. "You wanted to be a hero. Let's see how heroic you feel now." The storm that had been brewing all evening was finally about to break, and Kate realized that the quiet maintenance worker who had tried to protect her was about to face impossible odds. But as she watched Marcus position himself between the approaching threat and his terrified daughter, she also realized that Kyle Brennan might have just made the biggest mistake of his life. The man standing protectively over a little girl with a picture book wasn't just any maintenance worker, and these weren't just any impossible odds. Thunder rumbled outside the Imperial Hotel, and Kate Morrell found herself hoping that she was about to witness something extraordinary, because if she wasn't, they were all about to witness something tragic instead. The lobby held its breath, and the real battle was about to begin. The marble floor beneath Marcus's feet seemed to vibrate with the collective footsteps of Kyle's reinforcements as they spread throughout the lobby like a dark tide. Kate counted 20 men, then 25, all moving with the practiced coordination of a private security force that had done this before. The hotel's own security team retreated behind the reception desk, clearly outmatched and unwilling to escalate what was rapidly becoming a corporate war zone. "Lily," Marcus said softly, never taking his eyes off the approaching threat. "I need you to go sit behind that big plant over there, okay? Take your book and don't come out until Daddy says it's safe." The little girl's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded and scrambled toward a massive potted palm near the concierge desk. Kate watched her go, her heart breaking at the sight of such innocence caught in the crossfire of adult cruelty. "You still have time to walk away," Kyle called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent lobby. "Take your daughter and leave, and this ends here." Marcus straightened to his full height, and Kate noticed how his posture had shifted completely. Gone was the humble maintenance worker. In his place stood someone who radiated a quiet, deadly competence that made the air itself feel charged with potential violence. "And leave the lady to deal with your threats alone." Marcus's voice carried clearly across the marble expanse. "That's not how I was raised." Several of Kyle's men exchanged glances, and Kate caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Just one guy. Should be easy. Get this over with." But their leader, the scarred enforcer who had tried to grab Marcus earlier, looked less confident. There was something in Marcus's stance, something in the way he held himself, that spoke of training far beyond anything a hotel maintenance worker should possess. "Your choice," Kyle said with a shrug. Boys removed the obstacle. The first wave came fast, 4 men moving in a coordinated rush that would have overwhelmed any normal person. But Marcus wasn't normal. And what happened next defied everything Kate thought she knew about physics and human capability. He moved like water flowing around the first attacker's clumsy charge, and using the man's own momentum to send him crashing into a marble pillar with a sickening thud. The second man swung a haymaker that would have shattered a normal person's jaw, But Marcus simply wasn't there when the fist arrived, having ducked and pivoted with liquid grace. His counterattack was precise and economical, a single strike to a pressure point that dropped the second attacker like a marionette with cut strings. The third and fourth men hesitated, suddenly realizing they weren't dealing with an ordinary opponent. "Holy shit," someone whispered from the crowd of hotel guests who had pressed themselves against the walls, phones out, recording everything. Marcus didn't pursue his fallen opponents. Instead, he stepped back, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "That's enough. Nobody else has to get hurt." But Kyle's face had gone from triumphant to furious. "What are you waiting for? There's one of him and 20 of you." The next wave was larger. 8 men this time, coming from multiple angles. Kate found herself holding her breath as Marcus disappeared into a whirlwind of controlled violence. She'd seen action movies, of course, but this was different. There was no showboating, no unnecessary brutality. Every movement served a purpose. Every strike was calculated for maximum efficiency with minimum harm. A man with brass knuckles found his weapon turned against him in a move so fast Kate barely saw it happen. Another attacker's charge was redirected into an ornate fountain, sending water cascading across the marble floor. A third man's attempt at a chokehold became his own undoing as Marcus used leverage and momentum to flip him over his shoulder. "Jesus Christ," the hotel manager whispered, his face pale as he watched his pristine lobby become a battlefield. "What is he?" Kate found herself wondering the same thing. The man fighting with such devastating precision was the same one who had knelt down to promise his daughter ice cream, who had spoken so gently about finishing his work. The contradiction was staggering. "More!" Kyle screamed, his composure completely shattered. "Send them all." But his men were beginning to hesitate. Word was spreading through their ranks, whispered conversations about the way Marcus moved, about the precision of his strikes, about the growing pile of their unconscious colleagues. "Boss," the scarred enforcer said quietly, "maybe we should reconsider. This guy's not normal." "I don't care if he's the Terminator," Kyle snarled. "I want him destroyed." Marcus had positioned himself near the center of the lobby, now his back to the pillar where Lily was hidden, ensuring no one could approach his daughter without going through him first. His breathing was still controlled, his stance relaxed, but ready. Kate realized with growing amazement that he wasn't even winded. "Sir!" she called out, her voice carrying across the tense silence. "You don't have to do this. I can handle my own problems." Marcus glanced at her for just a moment, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. "With respect, ma'am, it doesn't look like anyone should have to handle this alone." The simple dignity of his response, delivered while surrounded by hostile men in a fight he could have easily avoided, hit Kate like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had stood up for her without wanting something in return? When was the last time someone had risked themselves simply because it was the right thing to do? "You know what?" Kyle's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "I'm done playing games. Richards." A new figure emerged from the crowd of enforcers, a man who moved differently than the others, with the kind of fluid grace that spoke of serious training. He was smaller than many of Kyle's other men, but there was something in his cold blue eyes that made Kate's blood run cold. "Sir," Richards' voice was cultured, educated, completely at odds with the violence implicit in his presence. "Mr. Callahan seems to think he's some kind of action hero," Kyle said. "Show him what happens to heroes." Richard smiled, and Kate saw Marcus's expression change for the first time since the confrontation began. There was recognition there and something that might have been concern. "Navy?" Richards asked, starting to circle Marcus like a predator. "Army," Marcus replied, mirroring the movement. "Close. Marine Force Recon. Yuba, SEAL Team 6. The revelation hit the lobby like a thunderclap. Several of Kyle's remaining men took involuntary steps backward, and Kate heard gasps from the crowd of onlookers. She felt her own knees go weak as the pieces finally clicked into place. Well, Richard said, his smile widening. "This just got interesting." "Daddy?" Lily's small voice carried from behind the plant. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Marcus called without taking his eyes off Richard's. "Just talking with some new friends." But Kate could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his weight had shifted. Richards wasn't like the others. This was going to be a real fight. "You know," Richard said conversationally, I always wondered how Team 6 guys would measure up against Recon Marines. Guess tonight I get to find out. They moved simultaneously, and the difference was immediately apparent. Where Marcus's earlier fights had been one-sided demonstrations of superior skill, this was a chess match played at superhuman speed. Richards was fast-trained and utterly ruthless, but Marcus was faster. The sound of their combat echoed through the lobby, the sharp crack of blocked strikes, the whisper of near misses, the grunt of effort as two highly trained killers tested each other's limits. Kate found herself pressed against a pillar, her heart hammering as she watched the deadly ballet unfold. Richards was good, better than good. His strikes were precise, his defense textbook perfect. But Marcus fought like water flowing around attacks, redirecting force using his opponent's aggression against him. And there was something else, something that made all the difference. He was fighting to protect, not to destroy. "Come on," Kyle screamed at his remaining men. "He's just one man. Take him down." But the rest of his enforcers had seen enough. Facing a former Navy SEAL was one thing. Facing one who had just systematically dismantled 20 of their colleagues while simultaneously dueling a Marine Force recon veteran was quite another. "Mr. Brennan," one of them said quietly, I don't pay you to think." Kyle's voice cracked with hysteria. "I pay you to follow orders." Richards pressed his attack, driving Marcus back toward the fountain. For a moment, Kate thought the Marine might actually win. His combination was brutal, precise, and backed by years of training. But then Marcus did something that defied explanation. He smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile or a triumphant one. It was the quiet, gentle smile of a father who had promised his daughter ice cream and intended to keep that promise. And in that smile, Kate saw something that made her heart race for entirely different reasons. This man, this warrior who was fighting impossible odds to protect a stranger and keep his daughter safe, wasn't just dangerous, he was beautiful. The realization hit her like lightning just as Marcus executed a move that sent Richards crashing into the reception desk with enough force to crack the marble facade. The Marine rolled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, but his stance was more respectful now. "Not bad," Richards admitted, wiping the blood away. "Not bad at all." "You're pretty good yourself," Marcus replied, settling back into a defensive position. "But I've got somewhere to be with my daughter tonight." "Ice cream, right?" Richard's smile held genuine respect now. "Kid that age, promises are important." The moment of mutual respect between warriors was shattered by Kyle's furious shriek. "Enough. If you won't do your jobs, I'll find someone who will." He pulled out his phone again, his fingers flying over the screen. Kate watched with growing dread as he made call after call, his voice getting more agitated with each conversation. "That's right, I said 50 men. I don't care what it costs. I want them here in 10 minutes, and I want that janitor destroyed. Yes, destroyed. And anyone who helps him." The lobby fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows and Kyle's increasingly frantic phone calls. Kate realized with growing horror that this was far from over. Brennan wasn't just angry anymore, he was unhinged, and he had the resources to turn his fury into something truly devastating. "Sir," she said to Marcus, moving closer to where he stood near the fountain, "you need to leave. Take your daughter and go. This isn't your fight." Marcus looked at her with those dark eyes that had already seen too much. "Ma'am, with all due respect, anyone who threatens a child's father in front of that child makes it my fight, and anyone who would use 50 men to intimidate one woman, that makes it personal." "You don't understand," Kate said desperately. "Kyle Brennan isn't just rich, he's connected. He has people everywhere. If you stay, if you keep fighting, he'll destroy you. He'll destroy your daughter's life." "Maybe," Marcus said quietly. "But if I leave, what kind of man does that make me? What kind of father? What kind of example am I setting for Lily?" Kate stared at him. This quiet hero who was willing to risk everything for a stranger, and felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent years in the corporate world surrounded by men who would sell their own mothers for a quarterly profit increase. She'd forgotten that people like Marcus even existed. "Besides," Marcus added with that gentle smile, "you look like someone who's been fighting alone for a long time. Maybe it's time you had some backup." Before Kate could respond, the lobby's main entrance exploded open again, and Kyle's reinforcements began pouring in. But this wasn't like the first wave. These men moved with military precision, wore tactical gear, and carried themselves like professionals. 50 men, Kyle announced triumphantly. All former military, all very expensive, and all very motivated to earn their pay. Last chance, Mr. Callahan. Walk away. Marcus looked at the overwhelming force arrayed against him, then at his daughter, hiding behind the plant, then at Kate, standing beside him with fear and admiration warring in her eyes. Lily, he called softly. Close your eyes, sweetheart. And whatever happens, remember that Daddy loves you very much. I love you too, Daddy, came the small, brave voice from behind the palm fronds. Kate felt tears stinging her eyes as she watched this good man prepare to make what might be his last stand. The odds were impossible. No one, not even a Navy SEAL, could face 50 trained fighters and survive. But as Marcus settled into his fighting stance, as his expression grew calm and focused, as he prepared to defend his daughter and a stranger against overwhelming odds, Kate realized she was about to witness something extraordinary. The quiet maintenance worker was gone entirely now, replaced by something far more dangerous. And as the hired army began to advance across the marble floor, as the hotel guests pressed themselves against the walls in terror, as Kyle Brennan smiled his cruel smile of anticipated victory, Kate found herself hoping that the man beside her was about to prove that sometimes, just sometimes, one good person could make all the difference in the world. The storm that had been building all evening was finally about to break in earnest, and Kate Morrell was about to discover just how far a true warrior would go to protect what mattered most. The 50 men spread across the Imperial Hotel's lobby like a well-oiled machine, their tactical boots silent against the marble as they formed a perfect circle around Marcus. Kate had never seen anything like it, the precision, the coordination, the way they moved as if controlled by a single mind. These weren't street thugs or corporate muscle. These were professionals. Marcus stood in the center of their formation, perfectly still, his breathing controlled and even. To anyone watching, he looked calm, almost serene. But Kate was close enough to see the subtle shift in his posture, the way his weight balanced on the balls of his feet, the almost imperceptible loosening of his shoulders. He wasn't just preparing to fight. He was preparing to dance with death itself. You know, Kyle called out from his safe position behind the reception desk. I almost feel sorry for you, Callahan. These men cost me $50,000 for one night's work. That's more money than you'll see in 10 years of mopping floors. I hope you appreciate the honor. 50,000. Marcus's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. That's it. You must shop at the discount mercenary store. Several of the hired soldiers exchanged glances, and Kate caught the ghost of smiles on their faces. Even facing impossible odds, Marcus was maintaining his sense of humor. There was something both admirable and heartbreaking about his refusal to show fear. Rodriguez, one of the mercenaries, a compact Hispanic man with sergeant's stripes tattooed on his forearm, spoke quietly to his squad leader. This doesn't feel right, sir. We're supposed to be taking down one maintenance worker, but look at him. Look at the way he moves. The squad leader, a grizzled veteran with gray at his temples and scars that spoke of foreign wars, studied Marcus with professional interest. Yeah, I see it. Question is, what do we do about it? Orders are orders, Thompson, came the reply from their employer's representative, a cold-eyed man in an expensive suit who clearly wasn't military, but held authority over the mercenaries. Mr. Brennan wants this handled quickly and permanently. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he nodded. In the world of private military contractors, you followed orders or you didn't get paid. And most of these men had families to feed, debts to pay, futures to secure. The moral luxury of questioning orders was something they couldn't afford. All units prepare for engagement, Thompson spoke into his radio. Target is considered extremely dangerous. Use overwhelming force. From behind her palm tree fortress, Lily's voice drifted across the lobby, thin and frightened. Daddy, I'm scared. When can we get ice cream? The sound of that innocent question hanging in the air filled with violence and greed hit everyone present like a physical blow. Kate saw several of the mercenaries shift uncomfortably, saw uncertainty flicker across their faces. These were soldiers, not monsters, and the thought of orphaning a child for money clearly didn't sit well with many of them. Marcus's response was gentle, loving, and absolutely devastating in its simple honesty. "Soon, sweetheart. Daddy just has to finish talking to these gentlemen first. Keep your eyes closed and think about what flavor you want, okay?" "Chocolate chip cookie dough," came the immediate, enthusiastic reply. "That's my girl," Marcus said, and Kate saw his expression soften completely for just a moment before hardening back into warrior focus. Kyle's voice cut through the emotional moment like a rusty blade. "Enough of this sentimental garbage. Take him down now." The first wave came from all sides simultaneously, 10 men moving in perfect coordination, intending to overwhelm through sheer numbers. What happened next would be analyzed frame by frame on social media for months to come. But witnessing it live was like watching magic performed at the speed of lightning. Marcus moved like liquid mercury flowing between the attackers with impossible grace. A mercenary's knife thrust met empty air as Marcus twisted away, using the man's momentum to send him crashing into two of his teammates. Another soldier's tactical baton was somehow redirected to strike his own squad member instead of its intended target. The beauty of Marcus's combat style wasn't in its brutality. It was in its efficiency. Every movement served multiple purposes. Every defensive action became an offensive opportunity. He fought like water, finding the path of least resistance, but water that could strike like lightning when the moment was right. "Jesus Christ," Thompson breathed into his radio. "This guy's not just military, he's elite. Very elite." "I don't care if he's Superman," came the cold reply from Kyle's representative. "You have a job to do." But the mercenaries were beginning to hesitate. Rodriguez found himself face to face with Marcus for a split second and saw something in the man's eyes that made him pull his punch at the last moment. There was no hatred there, no desire for violence. Just a father doing whatever it took to protect his child and help a stranger in need. "Sir," Rodriguez said into his radio, "I think we need to reassess this situation." "Negative. Continue the assault." The second wave was larger, more aggressive, but also more desperate. Kyle was screaming orders from behind the desk, his voice becoming increasingly shrill as he watched his expensive army struggle against a single opponent. The hotel guests pressed against the walls were recording everything, their phones capturing every impossible moment of the battle. Marcus caught a mercenary's tactical vest and used it to swing the man into three of his approaching teammates, creating a brief opening that he exploited with devastating precision. His strikes were surgical, targeting pressure points and nerve clusters that would incapacitate without causing permanent damage. Even fighting for his life, he was trying to minimize harm to men who were just doing their jobs. "He's holding back," Thompson observed with growing amazement. "He could be killing these guys, but he's pulling his punches." Kate watched in fascination and terror as Marcus systematically dismantled the attacking forces. She'd never seen anything like it, the way he seemed to anticipate every attack, the way he turned his opponent's strengths against them, the way he protected himself and the space around his daughter with equal intensity. But even superhuman skill had its limits, and Kate could see the toll the battle was taking. Marcus's breathing was becoming heavier, his movements fractionally slower. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the lobby's air conditioning. He was facing impossible odds, and physics was an unforgiving enemy. "Third wave," Thompson commanded reluctantly. 20 men overwhelming force." "No," Rodriguez said quietly. "What did you say, Sergeant?" "I said no, sir. This isn't what we signed up for." The rebellion spread through the mercenary ranks like wildfire. These were professional soldiers, men who had served their country with honor before economic necessity drove them into private military work. Watching a fellow warrior fight with such courage and nobility while protecting his child struck at something fundamental in their souls. "We were told we were taking down a security threat," another mercenary, Williams, spoke up. "This is just a dad trying to protect his little girl and help a lady in trouble. This isn't a mission, it's a hit job." Kyle's face turned purple with rage. "You're under contract. You'll do what you're paid to do or face the consequences." "The consequences of what?" Thompson stepped forward, his scarred face hard as granite. "Not beating up a father in front of his kid, not helping a rich bastard intimidate a woman. I've faced real consequences, Mr. Brennan. Court-martial consequences. Enemy fire consequences. This doesn't even register. The hired army began to lower their weapons, and Kate felt a surge of hope. But Kyle wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Fine, he screamed, pulling out his phone again. You want consequences? I'll show you consequences. I'm calling in favors from men who don't have your delicate sensibilities. As Kyle made frantic phone calls, Marcus finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. He was surrounded by soldiers who were no longer hostile, but he could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They didn't want to fight him, but they were caught between professional obligation and moral conviction. Gentlemen, Marcus said quietly, you seem like good soldiers, men with families' responsibilities. I don't want to fight you, and I don't think you really want to fight me. Why don't we call this a draw and let everyone go home to their kids? Thompson nodded slowly. Sounds reasonable to me, but he's not going to let this go. He gestured toward Kyle, who was still screaming into his phone. And he's got the kind of connections that can make all our lives very difficult. Then maybe, Marcus said with that gentle smile that was becoming familiar to Kate. It's time someone stood up to him properly. That's when Kate noticed what the others had missed during the chaos of the battle. Several new figures had entered the lobby. They weren't mercenaries or hotel staff. They moved with the kind of quiet authority that spoke of federal law enforcement, and they were positioning themselves strategically around the room. Mr. Brennan, a woman's voice cut through Kyle's phone conversation with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I think you've made enough calls for one evening. Kyle spun around to find himself facing Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI's white-collar crime division. She was flanked by 6 other agents, all wearing the kind of expressions that suggested Kyle's night was about to get much worse. What the hell is this? Kyle sputtered. I'm conducting legitimate business here. You're conducting a criminal enterprise, Agent Chen replied calmly. We've been monitoring your communications, Mr. Brennan. Conspiracy to commit assault, intimidation, extortion, and that's just from tonight's activities. We've been building a case against Brennan Industries for months. Kate felt her knees go weak with relief. Someone had been watching. Someone had been investigating Kyle's criminal activities. The cavalry had finally arrived. You can't prove anything, Kyle said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can. Agent Chen smiled coldly. You see, one of your former associates decided to cooperate with our investigation. Someone who knew about your offshore accounts, your fraudulent SEC filings, your habit of destroying companies through blackmail and intimidation. She gestured, and another figure stepped out from behind the federal agents. Kate gasped as she recognized him, David Morrison, Kyle's former business partner, and the man who had originally introduced Kyle to her father's company. Hello, Kyle, David said quietly. I told them everything. The color drained from Kyle's face as he realized his empire was crumbling around him, but his eyes blazed with the fury of a cornered predator, and Kate could see that he wasn't finished fighting. You think this is over? Kyle's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly across the now silent lobby. You have no idea what I'm capable of, what resources I have access to, what secrets I know about very powerful people. Actually, came a new voice from the hotel's main entrance. We know exactly what you're capable of. Kate turned to see a man in his 50s entering the lobby flanked by additional federal agents. His bearing was military, his presence commanding, and something about him made Marcus straighten to attention. Admiral Jackson, Marcus said with genuine surprise. Sir? Hello, Marcus. Admiral Jackson replied with a slight smile. Sorry we're late to the party. Traffic was hell. Kyle's eyes darted between the Admiral and Marcus, and Kate could see the calculations running behind his eyes. You set this up, he said to Marcus. You planned this whole thing. Marcus shook his head. I'm just a maintenance worker who wanted to help a lady in trouble, but apparently when you threaten certain people, other people take notice. Admiral Jackson stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Mr. Brennan, you made a critical error tonight. You targeted the wrong woman. What are you talking about? Kyle's voice cracked. Ms. Morell's father wasn't just a businessman, the Admiral explained calmly. He was also a defense contractor who worked on some very sensitive projects. Projects that are still classified, still vital to national security. When his daughter started receiving threats when someone began trying to steal his company through intimidation and fraud, certain parties in Washington took a very dim view of the situation. Kate stared at Admiral Jackson in shock. She'd known her father had government contracts, but this was the first she'd heard about classified projects or national security implications. That's when we began watching you, Mr. Brennan, Agent Chen continued. And what we found was a pattern of criminal behavior stretching back decades. Fraud, extortion, money laundering, conspiracy, you've been a very busy man. And tonight, Admiral Jackson added, you made the mistake of targeting a decorated Navy SEAL who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. Or perhaps, he smiled at Marcus, the right place at the right time. Kyle's empire was collapsing, but he still had one card to play. His hand moved toward his jacket, and Kate saw the gleam of metal as he drew a pistol from a concealed holster. Nobody moves, Kyle screamed, his voice echoing through the marble lobby. I'm walking out of here, and anyone who tries to stop me dies. The federal agents immediately drew their weapons, but Kyle had positioned himself behind the reception desk with a clear line of fire toward Marcus and Kate. The mercenaries, who had been reluctant to fight an honorable opponent, had no such qualms about protecting innocent people from a madman with a gun. Drop your weapon, Agent Chen commanded. You're surrounded. I don't think so, Kyle replied, his voice taking on a manic edge. I know too much about too many important people. They'll never let me go to trial. So I'm walking out that door, and if anyone tries to stop me, the janitor and his little girlfriend die first. Marcus had gone very still, his eyes fixed on the weapon pointed in their direction. Kate could see him calculating angles, distances, possibilities. Even now, facing a gun-wielding madman, he was trying to figure out how to protect everyone else. Kyle, Kate said softly, taking a small step forward. It's over. You've lost. Don't make this worse than it already is. Worse? Kyle laughed, and the sound was unhinged, terrifying. I built an empire from nothing. I was somebody, and now you want me to just give up and go quietly to prison? I don't think so. Daddy. Lily's small voice drifted from behind the palm tree, and Kyle's wild eyes fixed on the sound. Maybe I should start with the kid, he said with cruel calculation. Show everyone what happens when you cross Kyle Brennan. That was his final mistake. Marcus moved with speed that defied human capability, covering the distance to Kyle's position in what seemed like a single fluid motion. The gun discharged the sound, echoing through the lobby like thunder. But Marcus was already inside Kyle's guard, his hand clamping down on the weapon with crushing force. What followed was swift, precise, and utterly devastating. Kyle's weapon clattered across the marble floor as Marcus's training took over completely. Within seconds, Kyle Brennan was on his knees, his arm twisted at an impossible angle, his face pressed against the cold stone of his own hubris. Game over, Marcus said quietly. The lobby erupted in cheers from the watching hotel guests, but Marcus only had eyes for one thing. Lily, sweetheart, are you okay? I'm okay, Daddy, came the immediate brave reply. Can we get ice cream now? Marcus looked at Kyle writhing on the floor, at the federal agents moving in to make their arrest, at the mercenaries who were shaking their heads in amazement, and finally at Kate, who was staring at him with an expression that made his heart do dangerous things. Yes, sweetheart, he said with a smile that was pure joy. I think we can definitely get ice cream now. As the FBI led Kyle away in handcuffs, as the mercenaries began filing out with respectful nods toward Marcus, as the hotel staff started the process of cleaning up the debris from the battle, Kate found herself standing alone with the man who had just saved her life, her company, and quite possibly her faith in humanity. So, she said softly, maintenance worker, huh? Marcus had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, technically I do maintain things. Just usually more important things than hotel floors. Like what? Like democracy, freedom, the right of little girls to grow up safe and happy. His expression grew serious. Like the right of brilliant women to run their own companies without being terrorized by men like Kyle Brennan. Kate felt something shift in her chest, something that had nothing to do with corporate warfare or family legacies or billion-dollar companies. She was looking at a man who had risked everything for a stranger, who had fought impossible odds to protect his daughter, who had shown more honor and courage in one night than most people managed in a lifetime. "Marcus," she said, testing his name on her lips. "That's really your name?" "Marcus Callahan," he confirmed. "Former Navy SEAL, current single dad, and part-time maintenance worker when the bills need paying. And full-time hero, apparently." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the label. Just a guy trying to do the right thing. From across the lobby, Admiral Jackson approached with a knowing smile. "Marcus, I think we need to talk. There are some people in Washington who would very much like to meet you. People who have jobs that might be more suited to your particular skill set than mopping floors." Marcus glanced at his daughter, who was finally emerging from behind the palm tree with her picture book clutched to her chest. Then at Kate, who was watching him with eyes full of possibilities. "With respect, sir," Marcus said quietly, "I think I might have found something more important than any job." Kate's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. Was he talking about her? About them? About the possibility of something growing between a corporate CEO and a warrior poet who had just redefined her understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. "Besides," Marcus added with that gentle smile that had become so familiar, "I promised someone ice cream, and a promise to your daughter is the most important contract you'll ever sign." As federal agents finished processing the scene, as hotel staff worked to restore order to their marble sanctuary, as the last of the mercenaries disappeared into the Boston night, Kate found herself facing a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could return to her world of boardrooms and quarterly reports of corporate warfare and lonely victories. She could rebuild morale dynamics on her own terms, free from Kyle's threats, but also free from the complications of the heart. Or she could take a chance on the quiet hero who had appeared in her darkest hour, who had shown her that some things were worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the world was simply a good person, refusing to walk away from what was right. The choice should have been difficult, but as Marcus lifted his daughter into his arms and looked at Kate with eyes full of gentle invitation, she realized it was the easiest decision she'd ever made. The storm was finally over, but the real adventure was just beginning. 3 weeks later, the glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Hancock Tower buzzed with nervous energy as Boston's most prominent business journalists waited for what promised to be the story of the decade. Kate stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city spread out below her like a circuit board of dreams and ambitions. The autumn sun cast long shadows between the buildings, and she could see the Imperial Hotel in the distance, its elegant facade giving no hint of the battle that had changed everything. "Miss Morell." Her assistant Jennifer appeared at her elbow with a tablet full of last-minute details. "The cameras are ready, and we have confirmed attendance from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Bloomberg, and CNN. The FBI press liaison is here to coordinate with Agent Chen's statement, and Admiral Jackson arrived 10 minutes ago." Kate nodded, smoothing down her charcoal business suit. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of federal investigations, corporate restructuring, and media attention that had turned her from a struggling CEO into the poster child for corporate integrity. But none of that mattered as much as the text message that had arrived that morning from Marcus. "Lily and I will be watching. You've got this. M." "And the documents?" Kate asked, though she already knew the answer. "All verified, all authenticated, all devastating," Jennifer replied with barely contained satisfaction. "Kyle Brennan's going to wish he'd stayed in that federal holding cell." The irony wasn't lost on Kate that she was about to use the very tactics Kyle had threatened her with: public exposure, media pressure, reputation, destruction. The difference was that everything she was about to reveal was true, documented, and had been carefully verified by federal investigators. Agent Chen entered the conference room with her characteristic no-nonsense demeanor, carrying a briefcase that Kate knew contained enough evidence to bury Kyle Brennan for the rest of his natural life. Behind her came Admiral Jackson, his presence lending an air of military precision to the proceedings. "Ms. Morell," Agent Chen said with a slight smile, "are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 3 weeks," Kate replied. "The question is whether the world is ready for what we're about to tell them." Admiral Jackson checked his watch. "The timing is perfect. Our teams are conducting simultaneous raids on Brennan Industries offices in 12 cities. By the time this press conference ends, Kyle's entire criminal network will be in federal custody." Kate felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with something deeper, a sense of justice that went beyond personal vindication. This wasn't just about saving her company anymore. It was about stopping a predator who had destroyed countless other businesses and lives over the years. "There's something else," Agent Chen said quietly. "Something we discovered in Kyle's communications that you need to know before we go public." Kate's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "The contract Kyle was trying to force you to sign. It wasn't just about acquiring Morel Dynamics. Your father's classified work included developing cybersecurity protocols for military drone systems. Kyle was planning to sell that technology to foreign interests." The room seemed to spin slightly as the implications hit Kate. "He wasn't just trying to steal my company, he was trying to commit treason." "Exactly. Which is why this press conference isn't just about corporate fraud anymore, it's about national security." Admiral Jackson placed a reassuring hand on Kate's shoulder. "Your father would be proud of what you're doing today. He was a patriot, and he raised a daughter who's willing to fight for what's right." Kate felt tears threaten but blinked them back. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, she had a job to do. The conference room doors opened and the assembled media representatives filed in with the hungry energy of sharks scenting blood in the water. Kate had dealt with hostile press before, but this felt different. These weren't just business reporters looking for a quarterly earnings story. These were investigative journalists who sensed a major scandal in the making. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kate began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's excellent acoustics. "Thank you for coming today. What I'm about to share with you will fundamentally change how the business community views corporate governance and the lengths some individuals will go to in pursuit of profit." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, and a photograph of Kyle Brennan filled the screen behind her. 3 weeks ago, Kyle Brennan attempted to coerce me into signing over my company through threats, intimidation, and ultimately violence. Today, I'm here to show you that his criminal behavior wasn't an aberration, it was a business model. The room erupted in a flurry of note-taking and camera clicks as Kate methodically laid out the evidence. Bank records showing suspicious offshore transfers. Email communications discussing the destruction of business rivals. Audio recordings of Kyle threatening other CEOs. Video surveillance from the Imperial Hotel showing his private army in action. Mr. Brennan didn't just target Morel Dynamics. Kate continued, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. Over the past decade, his organization has systematically destroyed 17 companies, stolen proprietary technology worth billions of dollars, and engaged in criminal conspiracy across multiple jurisdictions. A reporter from the Financial Times raised her hand. "Ms. Morel, these are serious allegations. What evidence do you have to support these claims?" Agent Chen stepped forward. "I can answer that. The FBI has been investigating Mr. Brennan's criminal enterprise for 8 months. We have financial records, communication intercepts, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Mr. Brennan is currently facing 47 federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and violations of the Espionage Act." The Espionage Act reference sent a shockwave through the room. Whatever the assembled media had expected, it clearly wasn't treason charges. Agent Chen called out a CNN correspondent. "Can you elaborate on the national security implications?" Brennan Industries was attempting to acquire classified military technology through fraudulent means, with the apparent intent to sell that technology to foreign entities hostile to United States interests. Agent Chen replied calmly. "This wasn't just corporate warfare, it was an attack on American national security." Admiral Jackson added his voice to the proceedings. "The technology in question is critical to the defense of this nation. Mr. Brennan's actions potentially compromise the safety of American service members around the world." Kate watched the reporters absorbing this information, seeing the story growing larger in their minds. What had started as a business dispute was now a tale of corporate espionage, federal investigation, and patriotic resistance. Ms. Morel, a Wall Street Journal reporter, asked, "What role did your security team play in stopping this threat?" Kate smiled. thinking of Marcus and the quiet heroism he'd shown. I didn't have a security team. What I had was an honorable man who saw someone in trouble and decided to help, regardless of the personal cost. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a still image from the hotel security footage, Marcus standing protectively between Kyle's army and the space where his daughter was hidden, his posture radiating calm determination despite the impossible odds. This man, Marcus Callahan, is a decorated Navy SEAL veteran who happened to be working maintenance at the Imperial Hotel the night Kyle Brennan chose to escalate his threats to violence. Mr. Callahan single-handedly neutralized a force of 50 armed mercenaries while protecting both his 7-year-old daughter and a complete stranger. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A father protecting his child while helping a stranger wasn't just news. It was the kind of story that restored faith in humanity. "Where is Mr. Callahan now?" asked a reporter from Boston Globe. "Mr. Callahan has chosen to maintain his privacy," Kate replied, though her heart ached at the separation. "He's a humble man who doesn't seek recognition for doing what he considers his duty. But I can tell you that his actions that night embody the very best of American values: courage, selflessness, and the willingness to stand up for what's right." Agent Chen stepped back to the podium. "I can also tell you that Mr. Callahan's actions provided crucial time for federal agents to arrive and take Kyle Brennan into custody. Without his intervention, this criminal conspiracy might have succeeded." The questions continued for another hour, each revelation adding new dimensions to the story. Kyle's connections to corrupt politicians, his history of bankrupting veterans organizations, his pattern of targeting women-led businesses, specifically because he believed they would be easier to intimidate. Finally, Kate raised her hand for silence. "I want to say one more thing before we conclude. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was fighting to save my company. What I discovered is that I was fighting for something much more important, the principle that in America, justice still matters, that good people still exist, that sometimes when everything seems lost, heroes appear in the most unexpected places." She paused, looking out at the sea of cameras and notepads. "Kyle Brennan tried to destroy my company because he thought I was alone, vulnerable, and afraid. He was wrong on all counts. I wasn't alone. I had the support of dedicated federal agents, honest journalists, and most importantly, the protection of a good man who refused to walk away from someone in need. I wasn't vulnerable. I was backed by the truth and the strength that comes from fighting for what's right. And I definitely wasn't afraid not of Kyle Brennan, not of his threats, and not of the consequences of standing up to a bully." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Kate felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she'd been carrying for months. It was over. Kyle's reign of terror was finished. His criminal empire dismantled his future, measured in decades behind federal prison walls. As the media representatives filed out, Kate's phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart leaped when she saw Marcus's name on the screen. "Watched every minute. You were incredible." "Lily says you looked like a superhero," Kate smiled, typing back quickly. "I had a good example to follow. How's our favorite little girl?" "Excited. She wants to know if superheroes eat ice cream." "This superhero definitely eats ice cream. Want to test that theory tonight?" There was a pause, and Kate held her breath. In the 3 weeks since the hotel incident, she and Marcus had exchanged messages almost daily, but their actual meetings had been limited to coffee dates and brief encounters, while federal investigators debriefed them separately. The media attention had made it difficult for Marcus to maintain the privacy he valued, and Kate had been careful not to push. Lily would love that. So would I. Kate's heart soared. "Giordano's on Hanover Street, 7 o'clock. Perfect. Fair warning. Lily's going to want to hear all about how you defeated the bad guys. I'll tell her the truth, that her daddy is the real hero of this story. See you tonight, Kate." The casual use of her first name, the warmth implicit in the message, the promise of an evening spent with the two people who had become the center of her thoughts, it all combined to make Kate feel like she was floating 6 inches off the ground. Agent Chen approached as Kate finished packing up her presentation materials. "That was masterfully done. You have a real talent for this." "For what?" "Leadership, communication, inspiring people to do the right thing. Agent Chen smiled. Have you ever considered a career in public service? Kate laughed. I think I'll stick with running my company. Speaking of which, how soon before I can access the assets? Kyle froze. The injunctions are being lifted as we speak. By tomorrow morning, Morel Dynamics should have full access to all frozen accounts. Plus, Kyle's criminal assets are being seized, and a significant portion will be allocated to his victims' restitution fund. Kate nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. The money mattered, of course, her employees' jobs depended on it. But right now, all she could think about was the evening ahead, the possibility of building something beautiful with Marcus and Lily, and the way her life had completely transformed in the space of 3 weeks. Admiral Jackson joined them, his expression thoughtful. Ms. Morel, I have a proposition for you. Oh. Your father's work on military cybersecurity was groundbreaking, but it was also incomplete when he passed away. The Department of Defense would be very interested in discussing a contract to finish that work legitimately, this time with proper security clearances and government oversight. Kate considered the offer. It would mean steady revenue, government backing, and the chance to complete her father's legacy in a way that honored his memory. I'd be interested in hearing more details. Excellent. I'll have my people contact your people, but Kate... Admiral Jackson's expression grew serious. Make sure you have the right security arrangements. Kyle Brennan was just one predator in a very large ocean. Your company's work will always be valuable to the wrong people. I'll keep that in mind, Kate replied, though she was already thinking about a certain former Navy SEAL who might be interested in a career change that would let him use his skills to protect rather than simply maintain. The conference room emptied gradually, leaving Kate alone with her thoughts and her phone. The text messages were already starting to pour in, congratulations from employees, interview requests from media outlets, business propositions from companies that had suddenly remembered how much they valued integrity in their corporate partners. But there was one message that made all the others irrelevant. Dad says you're famous now. Are you still going to be my friend? The message was from Lily's phone, but Kate could picture Marcus helping his daughter compose it, both of them wondering if the corporate CEO would still have time for ice cream dates with a maintenance worker and his little girl. Kate typed back immediately, I will always be your friend, sweetheart. And your daddy's friend, too. Being famous doesn't change what's important. The response came back quickly. Good, Dad is making spaghetti tonight before ice cream. Want to come over instead? I want to show you my room. Kate's heart melted completely. I would love that more than anything. Text me your address. As Kate gathered her things and headed for the elevator, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a struggling CEO fighting a losing battle against a ruthless enemy. Tonight, she was going to have dinner with the 2 people who had shown her what really mattered in life. The elevator descended through the floors of corporate Boston, past offices filled with ambitious people pursuing deals and dreams and quarterly targets. Kate had been one of them for years, measuring success in stock prices and market share and board approval. But now she understood that the most important victories couldn't be quantified in spreadsheets. Her phone buzzed with one final message from Marcus. Lily's making you a welcome sign for dinner. Also, fair warning, she's designated you as her official bedtime story reader for tonight. Kate smiled as the elevator reached the ground floor. Tell her I accept both honors. And Marcus, thank you. For what? For showing me what a real hero looks like. The autumn evening air was crisp as Kate stepped out onto the Boston sidewalk, her heels clicking against the concrete as she headed toward her car. The city around her hummed with its usual energy, traffic and sirens and the distant sound of construction. But for the first time in months, Kate felt like she was part of something larger than corporate warfare and financial statements. She was part of a family that had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, bound together by courage and kindness and the simple recognition that some things were worth fighting for. The drive to Marcus's apartment took her through neighborhoods she'd never visited, past playgrounds where children chased each other in the fading light, past corner stores where families gathered for evening groceries, past the real Boston that existed beyond boardrooms and quarterly reports. Marcus lived in a converted brownstone in Charlestown, and Kate could see Lily's face pressed against a third-floor window, watching for her arrival. The little girl's enthusiasm was infectious, and Kate found herself taking the stairs two at a time, eager to share in the simple joy of a child's excitement. Marcus opened the door before she could knock his smile warm and welcoming. He'd changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a navy blue sweater that made his dark eyes even more striking. Behind him, Kate could smell something wonderful cooking and hear Lily's voice calling out updates on the progress of her welcome sign. "So," Marcus said as he ushered Kate inside, "how does it feel to be the woman who brought down Kyle Brennan?" Kate looked around the apartment. Comfortable furniture, children's toys arranged neatly in a corner, photographs of Marcus and Lily at various ages covering every available surface. It was a home filled with love and laughter, and the kind of genuine happiness that no amount of money could buy. "It feels," Kate said, stepping into Marcus's arms for an embrace that felt like coming home, like the beginning of something much more important than business. Lily came running from her bedroom, her welcome sign clutched in both hands. It was covered in glitter and featured a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "Kate, you're here. Dad made your favorite. My favorite." Kate looked questioningly at Marcus. "Lily decided that spaghetti carbonara is your favorite," Marcus explained with a grin. "I didn't have the heart to tell her I had no idea what you actually liked." "Well," Kate said, kneeling down to admire Lily's artwork, "it just so happens that spaghetti carbonara is absolutely my favorite. How did you know?" Lily beamed with pride. "I'm good at guessing. Dad says I'm going to be a detective when I grow up." "Or a superhero," Marcus added. She's still deciding between the two careers. As they sat down to dinner around Marcus's small kitchen table, Kate realized that this was what she'd been missing all her life. Not the elaborate business dinners or exclusive restaurant experiences, but the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with people who cared about each other without agenda or expectation. Lily chattered about her school day, about the book she was reading, about her plans to build a treehouse that would also serve as a secret headquarters for fighting bad guys. Marcus listened with the kind of patient attention that spoke of genuine love, occasionally catching Kate's eye with a smile that made her heart skip beats. "Kate," Lily said suddenly, "are you going to marry my dad?" The question hung in the air like a soap bubble, beautiful and fragile, and loaded with infinite possibility. Kate felt her cheeks flush while Marcus nearly choked on his wine. "Lily," Marcus said gently, "that's a very personal question." "But I like her," Lily continued with 7-year-old logic. "And she likes us, and she's brave like you, and she fought the bad guys, and she's pretty, and she laughs at my jokes." Kate found her voice. "Those are all very good reasons, sweetheart, but grown-ups need time to figure out important things like that." "How much time?" Lily asked practically. Marcus and Kate looked at each other across the table, and Kate saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't just attraction or gratitude or the bond forged in crisis. It was deeper than that, more permanent, the kind of connection that felt like destiny. "Maybe," Kate said softly, "not as much time as I thought." The evening that followed was magical in its ordinary perfection. They cleaned up dinner together with Lily, supervising and occasionally helping by putting dishes in approximately the right places. Kate read 3 bedtime stories, each one earning increasingly elaborate commentary from her audience of 1. Marcus made coffee while Lily finally succumbed to sleep. Her head pillowed on Kate's lap as they sat together on the living room couch. "She's amazing," Kate whispered, stroking the little girl's hair. "She likes you," Marcus replied, settling beside them. "More than likes you. She's been asking about you every day since the hotel. I've been asking about her too. About both of you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of Lily's sleeping form anchoring them to the moment. Outside, Boston settled into its nighttime rhythm, but inside Marcus's apartment time seemed suspended in golden light and possibility. "Kate," Marcus said finally, "there's something I need to tell you." Her heart clenched. "What?" "Admiral Jackson offered me a job today. Head of security for a new government contract. Good pay, federal benefits, the kind of work that would let me use my training for something meaningful again." Kate felt simultaneously happy for him and terrified of what it might mean for them. "That sounds wonderful. You should take it." The contract is with Morel Dynamics, Marcus continued with a small smile. Seems they need someone to oversee security for a classified military project. Kate stared at him. You mean? I mean, if you're willing to hire a former maintenance worker with trust issues and a tendency to get into fights with rich bullies, I'd like to apply for the position. The joy that filled Kate's chest was so intense it felt like flying. Are you sure it would mean working together, seeing each other every day, mixing business with whatever this is between us? Marcus finished. Kate, what happened at the hotel wasn't just about protecting a stranger in trouble. It was about protecting someone who mattered to me. Someone who had become important before I even realized it was happening. When? Kate whispered. When did I become important to you? Marcus smiled, his hand finding hers in the lamplight. The moment you refused to sign Kyle's papers, even when it would have been easier. The moment you stood up to a bully, even though you were terrified. The moment I realized that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Kate felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of joy, rather than fear. I was so scared that night. Scared of losing everything I'd worked for, scared of disappointing my father's memory, scared of being alone. You're not alone, Marcus said firmly. Not anymore. If you'll have us, both of us, you'll never be alone again. From the kitchen, the coffee pot beeped its completion, but neither of them moved. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, mumbling something about ice cream and superheroes. And Kate realized that this was what happiness felt like. Not the adrenaline rush of closing a big deal, or the satisfaction of beating a competitor, but the quiet contentment of being exactly where you belonged with exactly the right people. Yes, Kate said simply. Yes to the job offer. Yes to everything, Kate replied, leaning closer until their foreheads touched. Yes to the job. Yes to whatever this is between us. Yes to being part of your family. Yes to building something beautiful together. Marcus's kiss was gentle, reverent, filled with promise and possibility. It tasted like coffee and hope, and the kind of future Kate had never dared to imagine for herself. When they finally broke apart, Lily was sitting up on the couch, rubbing her eyes and grinning sleepily. Does this mean you're going to be my new mom? Kate and Marcus looked at each other and started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from pure joy, from the recognition that life sometimes writes better stories than anyone could imagine. We'll see, sweetheart, Kate said, pulling Lily into their embrace. But I can promise you this, I'm going to be around for a very long time. Good, Lily said with 7-year-old finality, because we still need to get that ice cream and somebody has to teach Dad how to braid hair properly. As the three of them sat together on Marcus's couch, wrapped in lamplight and laughter and the promise of tomorrow, Kate realized that Kyle Brennan had been wrong about almost everything. She wasn't weak or vulnerable or alone. She wasn't someone who could be intimidated or destroyed or forgotten. She was a woman who had found her family in the most unexpected place, a CEO who had discovered that the most important contracts were the ones written in trust and sealed with love. A fighter who had learned that the greatest victories weren't won in boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when good people chose to stand together against the darkness. The storm that had brought them together was over, but the rainbow that followed promised something even more beautiful, a life built on courage, love, and the unshakable belief that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morel Dynamics' renovated headquarters, casting long golden shadows across the sleek conference room where Kate stood reviewing the final presentation for their biggest military contract to date. The building hummed with productive energy engineers collaborating on breakthrough cybersecurity protocols, project managers coordinating with Pentagon liaisons, and in the corner office that had once been her father's, Marcus, directing a security briefing with the quiet competence that had made him indispensable to both the company and her heart. Nervous? Jennifer asked, appearing beside Kate with a steaming cup of coffee and that knowing smile she'd developed since becoming the unofficial keeper of office romance secrets. Terrified, Kate admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. This contract could set us up for the next decade, but if we blow the presentation, you won't blow it, came Marcus's voice from the doorway, and Kate felt that familiar flutter in her chest that still caught her by surprise after all these months. "You've got this, boss." The word boss was a running joke between them. Officially, Marcus was head of security and strategic operations, but unofficially, he was the person Kate trusted most in the world, with everything from classified military secrets to her deepest fears about living up to her father's legacy. The Pentagon delegation just arrived. Marcus continued stepping into the room with that fluid grace that never failed to make Kate's breath catch. Admiral Jackson, 3 generals, and Secretary Morrison herself. They're in the lobby with enough security detail to invade a small country. Kate smoothed down her navy blue suit, a deliberate choice that matched Marcus's eyes, and took a steadying breath. "How do I look?" "Like someone who's about to change the world," Marcus replied, his expression softening in the way that was reserved only for her. "Like someone whose father would be incredibly proud." The mention of her father still brought a pang of grief, but it was tempered now by the knowledge that his work would continue, that his legacy lived on in the technology they were developing and the principles they upheld. Morel Dynamics had become everything he'd envisioned, and more, a company that served both profit and purpose, that treated its employees like family, and that never compromised its integrity for convenience. "Daddy, Kate," Lily's voice echoed through the hallway as she bounded into the conference room, her school backpack bouncing behind her. At 7.5, she had appointed herself as the company's unofficial mascot and morale officer, and her presence in the office had become as natural as breathing. "What are you doing here, sweetheart?" Kate asked, kneeling down to catch Lily in a hug that had become second nature over the past months. "Shouldn't you be in school?" "Half day for teacher meetings," Marcus explained. "She insisted on coming to watch your presentation, said she wanted to see you defeat more bad guys with PowerPoint." Lily nodded seriously. "And I made you this for good luck." She pulled a small object from her backpack, a hand-painted rock featuring a crude but recognizable drawing of Kate, in a cape standing triumphantly over what appeared to be a computer. "It's you being a superhero again." Kate felt tears threaten as she examined the little girl's artwork. In Lily's world, there were clear divisions between heroes and villains, between right and wrong, between people who helped and people who hurt. It was a perspective that had helped Kate navigate the complex moral landscape of defense contracting and corporate responsibility. "It's perfect," Kate said, slipping the painted rock into her jacket pocket. "I'll keep it right here during the presentation." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction. "Now you can't lose." Marcus checked his watch. "Speaking of which, we should head to the main conference room. The delegation is getting settled and Admiral Jackson wants to start promptly at 10. As they walked through the corridors of Morel Dynamics, Kate marveled at how much had changed since that night at the Imperial Hotel. The company had tripled in size, adding new divisions for artificial intelligence research and quantum encryption development. They'd won contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and earned recognition as one of the most innovative defense technology firms in the country. But more importantly, they'd built something that felt like a family. Employees stayed late not because they were forced to, but because they believed in the work. Veterans found meaningful employment developing technology that would protect their former comrades. Brilliant minds gathered here not just for competitive salaries, but for the chance to work on projects that mattered. "Kate," Marcus said quietly as they approached the main conference room, "there's something I need to tell you before we go in." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "Admiral Jackson called me this morning. Kyle Brennan's appeals have been exhausted. The Supreme Court declined to hear his case. He's going to serve every day of his 40-year sentence." Kate felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and something that might have been pity for a man who had destroyed his own life in pursuit of power. Good. His victims deserve justice. "There's more," Marcus continued. "The federal government is officially commending Morel Dynamics for our cooperation in the investigation. They're also recommending us for the Presidential Medal of Freedom in recognition of our contributions to national security." Kate stopped walking. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Apparently, the technology we've developed has already prevented 3 separate cyber attacks on military installations. The White House wants to recognize that contribution. Lily, who had been listening with the intense focus of a child eavesdropping on adult conversations, tugged on Kate's sleeve. "Does that mean you get to meet the president?" "I think it might," Kate replied, still processing the magnitude of what Marcus had told her. "Cool. Can I come? I want to tell him about how you and Daddy beat up the bad guys." Marcus laughed. "We'll see, sweetheart. First, let's get through today's presentation." They entered the main conference room to find an impressive assembly of military brass and government officials. Admiral Jackson stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding immediate respect. Beside him sat Defense Secretary Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by her intolerance for inefficiency. "Ms. Morrell," Admiral Jackson said, rising to greet them. "Thank you for hosting us today. I believe you know most of our delegation." Kate moved through the room, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with officials she'd worked with over the past months. These weren't just government functionaries anymore, they were colleagues, partners in the effort to keep America safe in an increasingly dangerous digital world. "Ms. Morrell," Secretary Morrison said when they were introduced. "I've been following your company's work with great interest. Your father's reputation preceded him, but you've built something entirely new here." "Thank you, Madam Secretary. We've tried to honor his legacy while adapting to modern challenges." "Indeed. Shall we begin? I'm eager to see what you've developed." Kate moved to the front of the room, feeling the familiar pre-presentation butterflies mixed with the confidence that came from months of preparation. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the Morrell Dynamics logo, sleek modern but incorporating elements from her father's original design. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kate began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's excellent acoustics. "6 months ago, my company was under attack from forces that sought to steal our technology and sell it to America's enemies. Today, we're proud to present technology that will help defend this nation for decades to come." She clicked to the first slide, which showed a 3-dimensional representation of the cybersecurity network they'd developed. Project Sentinel represents a quantum leap in defensive cybersecurity. Using principles derived from my father's original work combined with cutting-edge artificial intelligence and quantum encryption protocols, we've created a system that can predict, identify, and neutralize cyber threats before they penetrate critical infrastructure. And the presentation that followed was a masterclass in technical explanation mixed with strategic vision. Kate walked the delegation through simulated attacks on power grids, financial networks, and military communications systems, demonstrating how Sentinel had successfully repelled each assault. "The beauty of this system," Kate explained, "is that it learns from every attack attempt. Each failed intrusion makes the network stronger, smarter, more capable of protecting against future threats." General Patterson, a gruff veteran with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, leaned forward. "Ms. Morrell, this is impressive work, but how do we know it's truly secure? How do we know it can't be compromised by the same forces that tried to steal your original technology?" Marcus stepped forward, his military bearing evident as he addressed his former superiors. "General, if I may, Ms. Morrell's team subjected Sentinel to the most rigorous testing possible. We brought in former NSA penetration specialists contracted with reformed cyber criminals, and even invited foreign allies to attempt infiltration. The system held against every assault. More than held, Kate added. In several cases, Sentinel was able to trace attack vectors back to their sources and provide intelligence that led to arrests of cybercriminal organizations. Secretary Morrison made a note on her tablet. Impressive. What about scalability? Can this system protect assets across multiple domains simultaneously? That's the revolutionary aspect, Kate replied, clicking to a new slide that showed a global network map. Sentinel doesn't just protect individual systems. It creates a web of protection that strengthens every connected asset. An attack on a power plant in California can provide defensive intelligence for a military base in Germany within milliseconds. The questions continued for another hour, each one demonstrating the delegation's growing enthusiasm for the project. Kate fielded technical inquiries with the expertise she'd inherited from her father, while Marcus provided operational context from his military experience. Together, they painted a picture of a defensive network that could fundamentally change how America protected its critical infrastructure. One final question, Admiral Jackson said as the formal presentation concluded. Ms. Morell, this technology represents billions of dollars in potential revenue. Why bring it to the government first? Why not pursue private contracts that would be more immediately profitable? Kate glanced at Marcus, then at Lily, who was sitting quietly in the corner drawing pictures of what appeared to be computers fighting monsters. Admiral, 3 years ago, my father developed technology that he believed could help protect American service members. Before he could see that vision realized, he passed away. 6 months ago, someone tried to steal that technology to sell to our enemies. Today, we're offering it to the people who need it most, the men and women who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. She paused, thinking of Marcus's fellow SEALs, still deployed in dangerous corners of the world of young soldiers and sailors and Marines whose lives might depend on the technology being developed in this room. Some things are more important than profit margins, Kate continued. Some contracts are written in duty rather than dollars. My father understood that. My security chief understands that. And if this company is going to bear the Morell name, we're going to honor those principles. The room fell silent for a moment, and Kate worried that she'd overstepped, that her idealism had undermined the business case for the contract. But then Admiral Jackson began to clap, followed by Secretary Morrison, followed by the entire delegation, until the conference room echoed with genuine applause. Ms. Morell, Secretary Morrison said when the applause died down, on behalf of the United States government, I'm authorized to offer Morell Dynamics an exclusive 10-year contract for the development and deployment of the Sentinel system. The initial value is $2.8 billion with performance incentives that could bring the total to over $4 billion. Kate felt her knees go weak. It was more money than she'd dreamed possible, enough to secure the company's future for decades, enough to fund research projects that could change the world. There's one condition, Secretary Morrison continued. We want your entire team to maintain their current roles throughout the contract period. That includes your head of security.
Sludge.
Kate looked at Marcus, who was grinning with the kind of pride that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with seeing someone he loved achieve their dreams. I think that can be arranged, Kate replied. As the delegation prepared to leave, handshakes and business cards were exchanged, and Kate found herself surrounded by congratulations and promises of future collaboration. But her attention was drawn to Lily, who had approached Secretary Morrison with the fearless confidence of a child. Excuse me, lady, Lily said politely. Are you important? Secretary Morrison smiled, kneeling down to Lily's level. I suppose I am in some ways. Why do you ask? Because Kate and my daddy are important too. They stop bad guys and protect people. Do you protect people? I try to, Secretary Morrison replied seriously. That's why we need people like Kate and your daddy to help us. Lily nodded approvingly. Good, because protecting people is the most important job ever. Later that evening, as the offices of Morell Dynamics gradually emptied and the Boston skyline began to twinkle with evening lights, Kate found herself alone in her father's old office with Marcus and Lily. The weight of the day's success was beginning to settle in, along with the realization that everything had fundamentally changed. $4 billion, Marcus said, wonderingly, settling into the chair across from Kate's desk. Do you realize what that means? It means we can afford to give everyone in the company a raise, Kate replied. It means we can fund research projects that might not be immediately profitable but could help people. It means we can ensure that Lily has college paid for, and graduate school, and probably her children's college too. Lily looked up from her coloring book. I don't want to go to college. I want to work here with you and Daddy. Kate laughed. Well, you'll need to go to college first to learn how to do the job properly. Can I study superhero management? I think that's called leadership studies, Marcus said solemnly. And yes, you can definitely study that. As the evening settled around them, Kate found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling CEO fighting to save her father's company. Tonight, she was the head of one of the most important defense contractors in the country, with a man she loved beyond measure and a little girl who had become the daughter of her heart. "Marcus," she said quietly, "there's something I've been thinking about." "What's that?" Kate reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box, her heart pounding as she opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "I've been thinking that maybe it's time to make some of our arrangements more official." Marcus stared at the ring, then at Kate, then at the ring again. "Kate, are you—" "I'm asking you to marry me," Kate said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. "I'm asking you to be my partner in everything business, life, raising Lily, building something beautiful together. I'm asking you to let me be part of your family officially." Lily had stopped coloring and was watching the exchange with wide, excited eyes. "Daddy, say yes, say yes." Marcus stood up slowly, moved around the desk, and knelt beside Kate's chair. "Catherine Elizabeth Morell," he said formally, "you are the bravest, most brilliant, most beautiful woman I've ever known. You took a broken soldier and his daughter and made us part of something extraordinary. Of course I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was witnessed by a 7-year-old who cheered loudly enough to echo through the empty office building and celebrated with ice cream from the emergency stash that Marcus had started keeping in the office refrigerator for exactly such occasions. 1 year later, on a perfect autumn afternoon in Boston, Kate walked down an aisle lined with fallen leaves toward the man who had taught her that strength came in many forms. Admiral Jackson officiated the ceremony. Agent Chen served as Kate's maid of honor, and Lily scattered flower petals with the serious concentration of someone performing a critically important mission. The guest list was a fascinating mix of Pentagon officials, FBI agents, Morel Dynamics employees, and the group of reformed mercenaries who had become Marcus's security team after discovering that working for someone honorable was far more satisfying than working for the highest bidder. "Do you, Catherine, take Marcus to be your husband to love and cherish in times of corporate crisis and quarterly success in boardrooms and bedrooms for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Kate said, her voice carrying clearly across the gathering of friends and colleagues who had become family. "Do you, Marcus, take Catherine to be your wife to love and protect, to stand by her side against all enemies, foreign and domestic, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Marcus replied, his dark eyes holding all the promises that words couldn't capture. "By the power vested in me by the United States Navy and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The kiss was tender, joyful, and interrupted by Lily throwing herself into their embrace with enough force to nearly knock all three of them over. The assembled crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Kate realized that this was what victory really looked like, not the destruction of enemies or the accumulation of wealth, but the building of something beautiful with people who mattered. The reception that followed was held in the renovated ballroom of the Imperial Hotel in the very space where their story had begun. The hotel management had eagerly agreed to host the event, proud to be associated with the romantic legend that had emerged from that night of corporate warfare and unexpected heroism. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Jackson said, during his toast, raising his champagne glass toward the head table where Kate and Marcus sat with Lily between them. "6 months ago, I had the privilege of witnessing something extraordinary. I watched a warrior protect his family and defend a stranger against impossible odds. I watched a brilliant woman refuse to surrender her principles, even when facing overwhelming pressure. And I watched both of them discover that sometimes the most important battles are fought not for territory or profit, but for love." He paused, looking out at the assembled guests, federal agents and defense contractors, former enemies who had become allies, soldiers, and civilians united in celebration of something pure and good. "Marcus Callahan is one of the finest warriors I've ever had the honor to command," Admiral Jackson continued. "Catherine Morell is one of the most brilliant defense contractors this nation has ever produced. But more importantly, they are two good people who found each other in the darkness and chose to build something beautiful together. They remind us that heroism isn't about superhuman abilities or impossible odds. It's about ordinary people making extraordinary choices in service of what they love." The toast was followed by dancing, by speeches from colleagues and friends, by Lily's carefully rehearsed performance of a song she'd written about superheroes and true love. As the evening wound down and guests began to drift away, Kate found herself alone with Marcus on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the Boston skyline that had become the backdrop for their love story. "So," Marcus said, pulling her closer as the autumn wind rustled through the trees. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Callahan?" "It feels like coming home," Kate replied, leaning into his warmth. "It feels like the beginning of the best adventure of my life." "Even better than bringing down Kyle Brennan," Kate laughed. "Kyle Brennan was just the opening act. The real story starts now." As if summoned by their conversation, Lily appeared on the terrace, having escaped her babysitter's supervision, with the practiced ease of a child who had mastered the art of being exactly where the action was. "Are you guys being mushy again?" she asked with 7-year-old exasperation. "Definitely," Marcus replied. "Is that a problem?" Lily considered this seriously. "I guess it's okay. But can we go home now? I want to show Kate all the wedding presents we got, and Mrs. Patterson said there might be a new dollhouse in there somewhere." Kate looked at this beautiful little girl who had become her daughter in every way that mattered, at the man who had shown her what love really looked like, at the life they were building together one day at a time. "Yes," she said, taking each of their hands in hers. "Let's go home." As they walked through the lobby of the Imperial Hotel, past the marble columns and crystal chandeliers that had witnessed their first meeting, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Kyle Brennan was serving his sentence in federal prison, his criminal empire dismantled, and his victims compensated. Morel Dynamics had become one of the most respected companies in America, developing technology that protected millions of people around the world. But more importantly, they had become a family bound not by crisis or convenience, but by choice. They had chosen to trust each other, to build something together, to face whatever challenges the future might bring as a united front. The autumn night was crisp and clear as they walked to their car, Lily chattering about wedding cake and dollhouses, while Marcus and Kate smiled at each other over her head. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to make a difference in the world. But tonight, they were simply a family heading home together, carrying with them the unshakable knowledge that love was the strongest force in the universe, that good people could triumph over evil, and that sometimes the most extraordinary stories began with the simplest act of one person refusing to walk away when someone needed help. In the distance, the lights of Boston twinkled like stars, and Kate Callahan knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of conflict, created love from the seeds of courage, and proven that heroes weren't born. They were made one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of love at a time. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but the rainbow that followed would shine forever, lighting the way for a family that had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk together into the light. And in the end, that was the most beautiful victory of all.